The sky cracked open at noon on a Tuesday when the world was too busy arguing about taxes and celebrity divorces to notice the sudden silence that fell like a dropped curtain. Birds stopped mid-flight, traffic lights froze on green, and a colossal holographic figure flickered into existence above the United Nations headquarters in New York. It was 12 stories tall, wearing something that looked like a cross between battle armor and a sequin jumpsuit, and it boomed in a voice that rattled windows and set off car alarms for 5 miles. Greetings, insignificant inhabitants of the blue planet. Your time has come. Send forth your greatest champion to the galactic arena. Victory, and your world survives. Defeat, and your species will be permanently discontinued. You have 48 hours. It paused dramatically, as if waiting for applause, then added cheerfully, or we could just burn the place down now if that's easier. Your call. The hologram vanished. The birds resumed flight. And the entire planet collectively forgot how to breathe. Inside the UN building, chaos exploded like someone had just announced they were replacing coffee with herbal tea forever. Heads of state yelled in 27 languages, diplomats tried to order calm through microphones that weren't plugged in, and someone from accounting kept demanding to know if the alien threat would affect next quarter's budget. Suggestions flew like paper airplanes in a hurricane. Call the army? Call NASA? Call the Avengers? Does anyone have Will Smith's number? In the middle of this, a nervous intern read the alien message again and pointed out the bit about a single champion. This did nothing to help. Half the room started shouting about sending a soldier. The other half argued for a scientist. A few people suggested celebrities for morale reasons. No one agreed on anything except that the situation was, universally, very bad. 2 blocks away, in a dim bar that smelled of spilled beer and regret, Ethan Cole watched the whole thing on a flickering TV while wiping down the counter with the same rag he'd been using all week. He was 35, broad-shouldered, and looked like someone who had once been in shape but had since developed a close, personal relationship with fast food. He was an ex-boxer, ex-scientist, an ex-employee of anywhere that had rules about showing up on time. These days he served drinks, avoided responsibilities, and tried not to think too hard about the decisions that had led him here. When the alien ultimatum repeated on screen for the 5th time, Ethan sipped his beer and said to no one in particular, "Well, that's one way to ruin happy hour." By the next morning, the entire world was in full-scale panic. Governments held emergency meetings that accomplished absolutely nothing. Scientists debated whether the hologram was real or some kind of elaborate prank, while the military quietly moved nuclear weapons around just in case. Talk shows brought on experts to explain the galactic arena, though no one had ever heard of it before yesterday. The only thing anyone knew for sure was that the deadline was now 41 hours away and Earth still didn't have a champion. Ethan hadn't planned on volunteering. He fully intended to let someone braver, smarter, or at least more qualified handle it. But then a news anchor mentioned that volunteers would receive a full pardon for any outstanding debts or criminal records, plus a reward of $10 million if they survived. Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment, thought about his overdue rent, his busted car, and the fact that his fridge currently contained nothing but mustard and baking soda. Then he finished his beer, stood up, and said, "I'll do it." The recruitment office was a converted gym filled with military officers, reporters, and a line of volunteers that ranged from serious professionals to people who clearly just wanted to be on TV. Ethan filled out the paperwork while a colonel explained that this was no ordinary mission. The champion would face opponents from across the galaxy in a series of contests. The exact nature of these contests was unknown, but losing would almost certainly result in death and the destruction of Earth. Ethan nodded along like someone agreeing to loan terms he hadn't read. When the colonel asked about his qualifications, Ethan said he was once a regional boxing champion, had a degree in theoretical physics, and could shotgun a beer in under 3 seconds. For reasons that would later be debated for centuries, they accepted him. 40 hours later, Ethan stood on a launch pad in Nevada as the alien transport descended from the clouds. It was sleek silver, and looked like it had been designed by someone who thought subtlety was for losers. The ramp hissed open, and out rolled a spherical robot with a single glowing eye. "Greetings, champion of Earth," it said in a voice dripping with sarcasm. "I am sorry, your escort and translator. Please note that the survival rate for first-time contestants is approximately 0.2%. Do try to beat the odds." The reporters went wild. Cameras flashed. World leaders watched from a safe distance as Ethan walked up the ramp, feeling like someone who had accidentally signed up for a talent show only to find out it was a gladiator pit. Sari led him through gleaming corridors to a seat facing a massive window. As the ship lifted off, Earth shrank behind them, blue and fragile and completely unprepared for what came next. Hours passed in silence, broken only by Sari's occasional commentary on Ethan's likelihood of survival, which grew steadily worse the closer they got to their destination. Then the ship dropped out of hyperspace, and Ethan saw it. The Galactic arena hung in orbit around a blazing neutron star, a colossal ring of metal and light big enough to hold a small continent. Ships from 1,000 species filled the surrounding space, crowds roaring from grandstands the size of cities. The arena floor below shifted and twisted like a living thing, reshaping itself for battles yet to come. Ethan stared through the window, feeling the weight of every eye in the galaxy on him. He had walked in alone. The fate of Earth balanced on his shoulders. And he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. The ship docked at a platform that looked like a cross between a sports stadium and a cathedral built by someone with no concept of physics but unlimited enthusiasm. Ethan followed Sari down a ramp into a waiting area filled with creatures so strange his brain refused to process them all at once. A being made entirely of smoke drifted past, murmuring in a language like wind chimes. A 10-foot reptile with gold-plated tusks stretched lazily in a chair that creaked ominously under its weight. Something that might have been 3 owls fused together sipped tea from a levitating cup. They were the champions, each representing a world that probably had committees arguing just like Earth's had. All of them looked dangerous, determined, and extremely uncomfortable with the idea of losing. Ethan was guided to a briefing hall where a holographic announcer shaped like a squid in a tuxedo explained the rules. There would be multiple rounds, each randomly chosen from the arena's vault of challenges. Sometimes combat, sometimes puzzles, sometimes diplomacy or endurance. The winner of each round would move closer to the championship. The losers would not return home. The announcer paused to clarify that losers did not always die outright. Some were instead claimed as property by the victor's species. Ethan glanced nervously at the 10-foot reptile, who grinned back like someone who collected skulls for fun. As the rules were read, Ethan realized the contests were not entirely about strength or intelligence. Points were awarded for style, creativity, and something called narrative flair, which no one explained but everyone seemed to take very seriously. The crowd was part of the scoring system, the announcer said. They liked drama, underdogs, unexpected victories. Heroes who made things interesting. The reptile cracked its knuckles like it planned to provide plenty of drama using Ethan's spine. Between briefings, Ethan met a few of his rivals. Or tried to. The 20-foot insect philosopher introduced itself with a quote about mortality so depressing Ethan had to order a drink afterward. The telepathic warlord from the planet Crevasse spoke directly into his head in a voice made of gravel and thunder, informing him that Earth's destruction was inevitable and he would personally enjoy tearing the planet apart atom by atom. Ethan smiled weakly and changed the subject to weather, which did not improve things. The strangest was a creature made entirely of translucent slime that communicated only through what Sari translated as interpretive dance. At one point it seemed to be challenging Ethan to a duel, or maybe offering him a sandwich. No one was sure. When the introductions ended, the champions were taken to their quarters overlooking the arena floor. Ethan stood at the window watching the ground shift and reshape itself into platforms, obstacles, and traps under glowing lights. The crowd noise even from here was a distant roar like an approaching storm. Sari floated beside him, running calculations on his odds of survival, which according to her latest update had dropped to 0.18% after factoring in his lack of experience, training, or any plan whatsoever. Ethan asked if anyone had ever beaten the odds before. Sari replied that one contestant 2 centuries ago had technically survived by surrendering early and living out the rest of his life as a decorative statue in the Emperor's garden. Ethan decided not to aim for that option. The first round began sooner than expected. A deep horn echoed through the station as lights blazed across the arena. Ethan and the others were led through massive gates onto the shifting floor while the audience erupted into cheers, screeches, and at least one kind of noise that sounded like someone gargling marbles. The holographic announcer reappeared above the arena with a smile far too cheerful for what was about to happen. Welcome, competitors, to Round 1. Today's challenge will be combat freeform melee. Weapons prohibited. Victory by knockout or crowd acclaim. Try not to die too quickly. The floor solidified into a wide platform surrounded by chasms glowing with energy. Ethan's stomach dropped as the other champions stretched, flexed, or in the case of the slime creature wobbled menacingly. A bell rang. Chaos erupted instantly. The telepathic warlord launched itself at the reptile in a blur of claws and teeth. The insect philosopher leapt 30 feet into the air, delivering a lecture on existentialism while kicking 3 smaller opponents into the chasm. Ethan froze in the center, trying to decide whether to run, hide, or faint. A 6-armed creature charged straight at him, swinging fists like wrecking balls. Ethan stumbled backward, tripped over his own feet, and crashed into a lever sticking out of the floor. The lever snapped. A section of the platform tilted violently, sending the 6-armed attacker tumbling off the edge with a surprised howl. The crowd roared with laughter and applause. Ethan realized they thought he had done it on purpose. He raised his fists awkwardly like a gladiator accepting praise while secretly hoping no one noticed he was shaking. One by one the other fighters went down, some through skill, others through accidents triggered by the arena's constantly shifting terrain. The insect philosopher slipped mid-monologue and disappeared into a pit. The telepathic warlord threw the reptile across the platform only for the reptile to land on a collapsing bridge section that flipped him out of sight. Through sheer luck or the universe's sense of humor, Ethan remained standing while everyone else fell or was knocked out. The announcer declared him the victor in a voice full of disbelief. The crowd went wild, chanting his name or at least something that sounded vaguely like it. Ethan barely had time to catch his breath before Sari floated over with an update. "Congratulations," she said. "Against all probability you have won the first round. Your survival odds have now risen to 1.4%. Try not to let it go to your head." Ethan stared at the empty arena floor where a dozen opponents had just vanished, then at the roaring crowd above, then finally at the alien sun blazing overhead. He had no idea how he was still alive, but for the first time since this started, a small part of him wondered if maybe, just maybe, he could actually win this thing. The celebrations after the first round victory were short-lived. Ethan was led from the arena floor through a tunnel lined with holographic advertisements for products he could not read but suspected were either energy drinks or funeral services. He was taken to a lounge where the surviving champions sat nursing wounds, egos, or in the case of the slime creature, puddles. The telepathic warlord glared at Ethan with eyes like molten rock, projecting thoughts into his head that felt like someone shoving hot needles through his brain. "You are lucky, Earth thing. Luck runs out." Ethan massaged his temples and replied aloud that he hoped so, because right now it was all he had. The warlord bared its teeth in what might have been a smile, or just a promise of murder. Sari floated in behind him with an expression somehow both smug and irritated. She informed him the next round would be announced soon, and that the arena officials had already begun recalculating betting odds because the audience adored underdogs and Ethan's accidental victory had made him a sensation. Ethan asked if being popular with the crowd helped. Sari explained that audience approval could sway judges, break ties, even change rules mid-match. The crowd liked drama. They liked surprises. They liked someone who made things interesting. Ethan muttered that he hoped not to die interestingly. While waiting, Ethan wandered through the preparation chambers and overheard fragments of conversation in dozens of languages, some spoken aloud, some in his mind. The insect philosopher was explaining the futility of existence to a group of smaller fighters who looked like turtles wearing jetpacks. The telepathic warlord conversed silently with the reptile gladiator, their expressions sharp and conspiratorial. Ethan slowed his steps, pretending to examine a vending machine that dispensed glowing cubes while straining to listen. They were discussing something about the arena not being what it seemed. Phrases drifted through the air like smoke. The game is fixed. The hosts feed on losers. The champion of Tarvos refused once, and they erased his entire system. The reptile growled softly, eyes flicking toward Ethan before returning to the warlord. When the conversation ended, both looked far too satisfied for Ethan's comfort. He backed away, unsettled by the idea that the arena might be more than just entertainment. Sari confirmed some of it later in the privacy of his quarters. The arena had existed for millennia, ruled by a species known only as the Overseers. No one had ever seen them directly. They spoke through holograms, enforced rules through drones, and promised survival or destruction depending on outcomes. Sari admitted that some competitors believed the games were a cover for something darker, that entire planets had vanished after losing. Ethan asked if Earth was safe if he won. Sari hesitated just long enough to make him wish he had not asked. The second round began with no warning. The floor transformed into a vast chamber filled with floating platforms, glowing symbols, and pulsing energy conduits. The announcer materialized above with theatrical flair, declaring this round a test of intellect and cunning. Competitors would solve the puzzle of realms, an ancient construct said to be unsolvable by anyone lacking genius-level intelligence or at least 3 brains. Ethan looked around nervously. Several rivals had literal extra heads. One creature seemed to be made entirely of calculators. The puzzle involved aligning massive rotating rings covered in alien symbols to match a hidden pattern projected briefly at the start. Most contestants dove in immediately, climbing platforms, shouting instructions, or telepathically coordinating. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the glowing rings like a man asked to fix a nuclear reactor using only a spoon. Sari whispered translations into his ear that made no sense whatsoever. Ethan tried turning one ring randomly. It locked into place with a satisfying clang. Another spin aligned 2 more symbols by accident. From somewhere above, the announcer declared Earth's champion off to a bold start. Ethan shouted back that it was entirely intentional. Rivals cursed in alien tongues as he stumbled through the puzzle, bumping controls, accidentally triggering mechanisms that seemed to help rather than hinder. At one point he leaned on a console to catch his breath and unknowingly activated a sequence that solved half the puzzle instantly. The telepathic warlord accused him of cheating, projecting rage directly into his skull. The reptile roared agreement. The crowd, however, loved it. Every blunder that somehow advanced the puzzle drew cheers and laughter from thousands of throats. Even the insect philosopher paused its lecture on cosmic futility to watch as Ethan, sweating profusely, slapped a final switch in desperation. The entire structure lit up like a festival. Puzzle complete. Earth wins again. The announcer declared him victor while Ethan tried to figure out what just happened. Sari explained in a tone of disbelief that he had solved a riddle scholars spent centuries studying. Ethan admitted he thought the puzzle had been a map or possibly a menu because some of the symbols looked like food. Sari recalculated his survival odds upward to 3%, muttering about statistical impossibilities. After the round ended, Ethan was approached in the corridors by a creature cloaked in shadows who spoke through a translator device clipped to its throat. It claimed to represent a faction opposed to the Overseers. They knew the arena was rigged, it said. They needed someone inside to expose the truth. If Ethan threw the final match, ensuring a particular rival's victory, Earth would be spared and he would be rewarded beyond imagination. Ethan asked what happened to worlds that won honestly. The creature only said, "You do not want to know," before vanishing into the shadows. Back in his quarters, Ethan stared out at the stars, mind racing. If the games were rigged, if even victory might doom Earth, then what choice did he have? Sari advised ignoring conspiracies and focusing on surviving the next round. But Ethan could not shake the image of vanished planets, of overseers feeding on losers, of secret deals whispered in corridors. The telepathic warlord passed by his door, meeting his eyes with a look that promised violence and perhaps worse. The third round announcement echoed through the station. Ethan squared his shoulders, feeling the weight of a planet on his back. Somewhere deep down he knew the games were not what they seemed. And he suspected the real fight had not even started yet. The third night aboard the arena station was unlike the others. There was no celebrating Ethan's second victory. The corridors felt colder, the alien lights dimmer, the champions quieter as they returned to their quarters. The whispers about the overseers, about rigged matches and disappearing planets, spread like smoke through every corner of the station. Ethan tried sleeping, but the mattress felt like it was made of regret and bricks, and the dreams that came were worse. He dreamt of Earth as a cratered wasteland, of skyscrapers crumbling like sandcastles, of voices crying out before vanishing into nothing. When he woke, sweaty and shaking, Sari was floating silently beside the bed like she had been watching him all night. She announced in her usual cheerful tone that the next round would begin in 2 hours. Ethan told her he needed coffee and possibly therapy. She told him both were available in the cafeteria, but the therapy required signing a waiver. By the time he arrived at the arena gates, the tension among the champions was like a thunderstorm ready to break. The reptile gladiator had deep cracks across one of its tusks from the first round. The insect philosopher carried itself with stiff, jerky movements, one leg dragging slightly as if injured. The telepathic warlord stood in the center like a monolith of muscle and hatred, eyes glowing faint red as if lit from within. Even the slime creature, usually rippling with manic energy, wobbled slowly as though parts of it had been sliced away. Yet none of them looked at Ethan with the contempt he expected. Instead, there was calculation in their eyes, and something like fear. The announcer arrived in a blaze of holographic trumpets to reveal that the third challenge would test endurance and adaptability. Competitors would navigate the shifting maze, a labyrinth suspended over pits of energy fire, constantly rearranging its walls. Survive until the end, reach the center, claim the beacon. Sounds simple, the announcer declared, though history suggested otherwise given that no contestant had ever completed it alive. The crowd loved this, roaring approval that rattled the arena towers. Before entering the maze, each competitor was offered a flask of water by drones hovering overhead. Ethan accepted his without thinking, drinking deeply to wash the taste of nerves from his mouth. 5 minutes later, as the maze began to shift and slam walls into place, his stomach twisted like he had swallowed a nest of angry eels. His heart pounded too fast. His hands shook. Somewhere behind his eyes a sharp electric pain danced like lightning. The reptile gladiator laughed when it saw his stagger. Poison, it hissed in delight, before disappearing around a corner. Ethan stumbled through the first passages, vision swimming. The walls slammed shut behind him, opening new corridors ahead that twisted without logic. Heat blasted from the glowing pits below, while above the audience screamed approval at every close call. Ethan tripped over a collapsing bridge, clinging to the edge by trembling fingers while the telepathic warlord landed gracefully beside him, eyes burning with malice. It leaned close, voice inside his head like molten iron. You were meant to fall here, Earthling. The poison ensures it. It will be quick. But when the warlord tried shoving him off the ledge, Ethan's convulsing body twisted unexpectedly, knees slamming into the alien's chest by accident. It toppled backward with a roar, crashing through a section of brittle flooring and vanishing into the pits below. The crowd exploded in laughter and cheers. Ethan dragged himself upright, stumbling onward through shifting passages while the announcer shouted about the unexpected drama. At one intersection the insect philosopher appeared limping badly, its multifaceted eyes dim. It spoke while running beside Ethan, words translated through Sari's link. The overseers want a show, it said. They want chaos before the feast. Win or lose, they devour the story and the world alike. I have seen it before. Planets erased. Civilizations gone. All for spectacle. Its voice was oddly calm, like someone discussing weather instead of extinction. Then a falling wall cut the creature off from Ethan's path, leaving its fate unknown. By the time Ethan reached the maze's center platform, only 3 competitors remained, himself, the reptile gladiator, and the slime creature missing large sections of its body but still quivering defiantly. The beacon pulsed atop a pedestal surrounded by spinning blades of energy. The reptile lunged first, moving with terrifying speed despite its injuries. It swatted the slime aside like spilled soup, roaring triumphantly as it reached for the beacon. Ethan, half conscious from poison and exhaustion, tripped again on nothing at all. He crashed into the pedestal just as the reptile grabbed the beacon. Their collision knocked the device spinning through the air where it landed miraculously in Ethan's hands before either realized what happened. The crowd went berserk. The reptile bellowed rage so loud the walls shook. Arena drones descended instantly, separating combatants, declaring Earth's champion the unexpected victor once more. Medical bots swarmed him with antidotes, cooling sprays, and something that smelled like mint mixed with lightning. The poison drained from his system in seconds, leaving him shaky but alive. Back in the preparation hall, the reptile gladiator confronted him, eyes blazing. "That was mine," it snarled. "This is rigged. Earth survives because they want comedy before slaughter." It accused the overseers of manipulating everything, of scripting drama while pretending at fairness. Other champions gathered, some agreeing, others too frightened to speak. Ethan realized then that whatever waited at the tournament's end would not be salvation for Earth whether he won or lost. Deals whispered in corridors, poisoned water, scripted chaos, planets erased for entertainment, all pointed to a game whose outcome had been decided long before he arrived. The only thing left uncertain was how much destruction the overseers wanted before the finale. When news arrived that Earth itself was now under siege by arena drones circling the atmosphere, Ethan understood the message clearly. Win the games, lose your world anyway. Refuse to play, and they'd burn it sooner. The overseers had built a no-win stage dressed as a tournament. As he sat alone in his quarters after the third victory, Ethan stared at his trembling hands and thought about his family, about Earth's cities lit up at night, about the ocean waves hitting shorelines that might not exist tomorrow. He could not trust the rival champions, could not trust the overseers, could not even trust victory itself. The only thing he knew for certain was that the next round would decide everything, one way or another, and that the overseers had not yet seen what desperation could make a man do. The fourth night before the final round was worse than all the others combined. The arena's lights dimmed across the station to simulate evening, but sleep refused to come for anyone. Champions paced their quarters like restless predators, the air heavy with tension and the bitter smell of alien medicines patching up wounds from earlier battles. From the window Ethan watched the endless stars beyond the arena walls, trying to imagine Earth out there somewhere, whole and alive, waiting on the edge of destruction for one man to keep it breathing. He knew now the overseers were playing a game far beyond what anyone had realized. The whispers from the insect philosopher, the rage of the reptile gladiator, the conspiracy in the corridors, the poisoned drink, all of it painted the same picture. Win or lose, Earth was only another story in the overseer's endless theater, another spectacle for the crowd before the ending everyone expected. When dawn came in the form of burning white light across the station walls, Ethan felt like he had aged a decade in a single night. Sari floated into the room, her usual sarcasm softened to something close to concern. She informed him the final challenge had been selected at random by the overseers themselves. For the first time in tournament history, it would be a test of diplomacy rather than combat. Contestants would address the crowd, the overseers, and the entire galactic audience to prove why their species deserved survival. Points would be awarded for persuasion, originality, and what the announcer called emotional resonance. Sari remarked dryly that the crowd adored irony, so Earth's accidental champion pleading for mercy should be a delightful performance. Ethan stared at her like she had just suggested he juggle knives blindfolded. The surviving rivals prepared in their own ways. The insect philosopher, patched together with glowing splints, meditated while muttering existential poetry that made nearby listeners question the point of existing at all. The reptile gladiator roared speeches to itself in its native tongue, a sound like earthquakes arguing. The slime creature rehearsed elaborate dances interpreted by drones as threats, promises, and at one point a recipe for soup. The telepathic warlord, somehow alive after falling into the energy pits, radiated fury so strong it made other competitors bleed from the nose when they passed too close. Ethan had nothing. No speech prepared, no training in diplomacy beyond arguing with landlords about rent increases. He asked Sari for advice. She told him previous winners typically quoted philosophy, statistics, or epic poetry from their civilization's greatest minds. Ethan pointed out Earth's greatest speeches were given by people far more charismatic than him, and usually not while sweating through poison after nearly dying 3 times. Sari shrugged, saying failure would at least be entertaining. The arena transformed into a colossal amphitheater glittering with energy shields and banners from 1,000 worlds. The audience filled every seat, a living ocean of scales, fur, feathers, and forms beyond description. Above them all floated the Overseer's holographic throne, faceless and radiant. Voices merged into a single echo that announced the final round had begun. Each champion would speak in turn. The winner would claim survival for their species. The insect philosopher went first, delivering a monologue about consciousness, morality, and the futility of violence that lasted nearly 20 minutes and ended with several audience members sobbing quietly. The reptile gladiator followed with a thunderous speech about strength, dominance, and glorious conquest, promising the galaxy eternal order under its reign. The slime creature performed a dance so moving half the crowd threw offerings into the arena floor. The telepathic warlord projected images directly into everyone's minds showing the horrors awaiting them if its species was denied victory, entire star systems crushed under iron rule. Then it was Ethan's turn. He walked to the center platform feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. The lights burned down on him. Billions of eyes watched from across the galaxy. He cleared his throat, hands shaking, and decided there was no point pretending to be something he was not. He told them Earth was nothing special. Just a blue rock with oceans and mountains and people who argued about everything from politics to pineapple on pizza. A place where most folks tried to live decent lives, raise families, fall in love, make mistakes, fix them, and sometimes build things that lasted longer than they did. He admitted humans were messy, loud, and often foolish, but they were also capable of kindness so staggering it could stop wars, of creativity that filled skies with music and canvases with color, of courage that sent them across oceans and into the stars without any guarantee of return. He confessed he had not wanted this job. He was no soldier, no poet, no genius. He was just a man who made more mistakes than he could count, who stumbled through every round by accident, or luck, or both. And maybe, he said, maybe that was the point. Because humanity survived the same way. Through disasters, plagues, wars, mistakes so big they nearly erased themselves, and yet somehow people kept standing back up, kept laughing, kept building again. Not because they were the strongest or smartest, but because giving up simply never occurred to them. He told them if the overseers wanted perfection, they would never find it on Earth. But if they wanted a story worth telling, a species that turned every failure into another chapter instead of a full stop, then maybe Earth was exactly what the galaxy needed. He said it all plainly, without poetry, without threats, without even raising his voice. When he finished, there was silence so deep it swallowed the entire arena. Then the crowd erupted. The noise rose like a physical thing, shaking the amphitheater walls, a tidal wave of sound carrying across every deck and corridor. The overseer's holographic throne flickered as if conferring silently. At last their merged voices declared the unexpected. By audience acclaim, Earth's champion had triumphed. Humanity would survive. The reptile gladiator roared fury loud enough to crack stone. The telepathic warlord hurled psychic curses that made drones spark and fall from the sky. The insect philosopher bowed in resigned acceptance. The slime creature jiggled in what might have been applause. Ethan stood frozen as the crowd chanted his name, or something close enough, the sound echoing into the stars. For the first time since this began, he allowed himself to believe Earth might actually live to see another sunrise. The announcement of Earth's survival rolled through the arena like thunder breaking after a storm. Billions of voices cheered, roared, shrieked, or made noises beyond any human description. Ethan stood in the center of the platform blinking up at the holographic overseers, waiting for them to change their minds, to reveal some cruel twist where the victory was only another joke at his expense. But the overseers simply flickered once more, their merged voices booming across the amphitheater declaring the games concluded, the champion of Earth victorious, the planet spared by law of the arena. The crowd chanted again, the noise rising like a living thing circling the stars. Drones swooped through the air streaming banners of light, fireworks blossomed across the void above the station, and the announcer shouted something about history being made while trying to avoid being flattened by the reptile gladiator tearing apart pieces of scenery in rage. Ethan left the platform on legs that felt like wet rope. Sari floated beside him in a silence he had never heard from her before. When he asked if it was really over, if Earth was truly safe, she paused a long time before answering. The overseers always keep their word publicly, she said at last. What they do in secret is another matter entirely. It was not exactly comforting. Back in the preparation hall, the surviving champions gathered in a tense circle. The insect philosopher bowed to Ethan with the solemnity of someone attending a funeral rather than acknowledging victory. The slime creature rippled a series of gestures Sari translated as a mixture of congratulations and a suggestion to invest in interstellar real estate, while prices were low. The reptile gladiator stood apart, fists clenched, tusks cracked, hatred burning in its eyes like coals that would never cool. The telepathic warlord leaned against a wall staring at nothing, its thoughts locked away, too quiet after so much fury. Officials from the arena administration arrived, creatures of many shapes wearing identical silver emblems. They handed Ethan a scroll glowing with alien symbols Sari explained was a legally binding contract guaranteeing Earth's survival under the rules of the games. Ethan signed without reading a word, partly because he could not understand it, and partly because he suspected reading it would only give him nightmares about loopholes. The journey back to Earth began hours later aboard the same silver ship that had carried him here, though now it was escorted by drones carrying victory banners projecting his awkward face across half the sky. Ethan watched the arena shrink into the distance, the neutron star blazing behind it like an unblinking eye. For all its celebrations and fireworks, the place still felt like a trap disguised as a palace, a theater built over a graveyard. He wondered how many planets had stood where Earth did now, clutching victory before discovering what it truly cost. When the ship descended through Earth's clouds 2 days later, the world erupted with relief. News networks broadcast his arrival live from every continent. Crowds filled streets, waving banners, cheering until their voices cracked. Children wore cardboard helmets pretending to fight invisible aliens while vendors sold drinks named after him that tasted like bad decisions and sugar. Ethan stepped off the ramp into a blinding storm of cameras, reporters shouting questions about how it felt to save the planet, whether he planned to run for office, and if he was single. He answered none of them because he had no idea how to explain any of it, not the games, not the overseers, not the whispers of conspiracy and vanished worlds. He simply held up the glowing scroll like a shield until security hustled him into a waiting vehicle. Over the next week, governments held celebrations in his honor, ranging from awkward parades to banquets where politicians who had never heard his name 2 months ago now toasted him as the savior of humanity. Scientists begged for details about alien technology while military generals demanded blueprints for weapons Ethan had never even seen. Religious leaders called him chosen, comedians called him lucky, historians called him the start of a new era. Ethan called himself tired and asked mostly for cheeseburgers and sleep. Yet beneath the festivals and fireworks, unease lingered like smoke after a fire. Satellites reported strange objects still orbiting near the moon, remnants of arena drones that refused to leave. Radio telescopes intercepted fragments of transmissions between unknown ships beyond Mars. Sari, now permanently assigned as Earth's ambassador to the arena network, admitted quietly to Ethan one night that several champions from past games had reported similar signs before their worlds vanished decades later. She told him victory in the arena guaranteed only survival until the next tournament. The overseers always returned eventually. Ethan tried living normally again, but normal refused to fit anymore. Everywhere he went, people stared like he was a monument rather than a man. Talk shows wanted interviews, companies wanted endorsements. One film studio offered to make a trilogy about his life starring an actor Ethan privately thought was much better looking than him. He avoided all of it, spending days walking through familiar streets now decorated with murals of his face, feeling like he had stepped sideways out of his own life into someone else's story. Then one evening, as the sun dropped behind city towers, he returned to his apartment, and found a small drone hovering inside like it had always belonged there. It carried no weapons, only a single silver envelope stamped with the emblem of the overseers. Sari scanned it twice before announcing it was genuine. With shaking hands, Ethan opened the envelope and pulled out a thin sheet of metal etched with alien script. Sari translated silently beside him. It was an invitation. Not for him alone this time, but for Earth itself. The next tournament, it said, would be larger than ever before. Entire civilizations would compete not through single champions but through armies, leaders, and worlds aligned in alliances or destroyed in defeat. Earth had one cycle to prepare. Refusal to participate would forfeit survival automatically. Ethan sat down slowly on the couch as the last light of day faded from the window. Somewhere beyond the stars the arena waited, hungry for its next story, its next war, its next planet to dangle between survival and extinction for the sake of spectacle. The crowd would return. The overseers would return. And this time, Earth would not be able to hide behind one accidental champion stumbling through chaos on luck and desperation alone. Far above the atmosphere the silent drones still circled, patient as vultures.